The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
Welcome to the 15-Point Plan podcast. I'm here with my co-host and our audio producer, Chad Himes and Dave Weldon. And we're sitting here excited to talk to you about a topic today that is on the vein of influence.
Yes.
Right, Chad?
Let's remember to introduce yourself, the studious Jillene Snell.
Well, that was my first introduction. I figured my voice would introduce myself.
Let's make sure
Jillene,
they know it's you.
Also co-host of the 15-Point Plan podcast. I'm here and excited to spend a few minutes with you today. I hope you enjoy this topic because I enjoyed my research behind it. And I read a little, Chad, in preparation for this podcast. But interestingly enough, I've also increased my reading percentage this year by about 50%.
Wow. Congratulations.
So, huge increase. And, that was a really big struggle for me to overcome because I have two toddlers. I work full-time or more than full-time. And then I also work out and manage a household and balance all of that. And it's very difficult. It's difficult, and I have a lot of limiting beliefs around the time that I have available to read. But the benefits are outstanding, Chad.
Yes, they are,
So
Jillene.
that's what we're going to talk about today is the benefits of reading.
Okay, now this could have been something we held back until learning, which is part of the 15-Point Plan. And heck, when we get to learning, we might go back and say, everyone just go back and listen to that reading episode we did again. Yet we know that reading is one of those things, Jillene, that can influence us at such a high level. So we wanted to dive right into it as we were talking about this even last week before you went off and did the research, because you had some famous people's like top 10 reading lists and stuff, and it got you all excited about it. Talk to us about what we are going to talk about during today's influence focus of reading.
Right. So the benefits and the influence that reading has on us biologically, the influence that it has on us in the way that we conduct our days and our interpersonal skills with others, the influence that hearing versus reading a paper copybook has on us as well.
Okay.
And the influence that it had on a particular person's life that is anonymous but inspiring.
Okay.
And then some of our top recommended books that we feel can influence people in a dramatic way this year. So that's what we're covering. And the first one is on the scientific topic, the benefits, the biological benefits of reading. Science shows that reading doesn't just fill our brains with information. It actually changes the way that our brains work for the better. And this is considered more of a short-term benefit according to the research. I think it's a long-term benefit as well. Science literature, Chad, shows that reading is basically an empathy workout. By nudging us to take the perspective of characters very different from ourselves, it boosts our EQ.
That's interesting.
Right.
So I put myself in the shoes of that character, which helps my emotional intelligence.
Right. And this effect can literally be seen in our brave waves when we read. I'd be curious to hook up some of those electrodes and actually see that on screen. Maybe one day we'll do that together as an exercise.
Okay.
But you can literally see the changes in your brain happening. And like you said, if there was a character in our book playing tennis, areas of our brain would actually light up and become activated as if, Chad, you and I were physically out there on the court playing tennis.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd ever be reading a book where a character was playing tennis. Probably wouldn't have interested me to pick that up. Yet I get what you're saying, Jillene. I get that. What else does the research tell us?
Yeah, so another line of research suggests that deep reading, and this does not include scanning your phone or Facebook or skim reading, builds up our ability to focus and grasp complex ideas.
I can see that for sure.
And that one I can see even with my increase, my 50% increase, that's already starting to take place. Just imagine if our world had increased emotional intelligence and an elevated ability to focus and grasp complex ideas.
We would have spaceships.
What would our world look like?
We would be Star Trek. We would finally have all come together and gotten over the petty stuff. All right.
Right.
Keep going.
So reading isn't just a way to cram facts into our brains. It's a way to rewire how our brains work in general. It strengthens our ability to imagine alternative paths, remember details, picture detailed scenes, and think through those complex problems. So, in short, reading makes us not only more knowledgeable, but functionally smarter. And who doesn't want to be functionally smarter? Those are some massive benefits.
Okay.
So I think everyone would agree after hearing just that we should read more.
Yes, everyone should read more just based on that. Don't even listen to the rest of the podcast if you don't want to. Just read more.
But please do.
Yes, please keep listening, yet that was enough. You should be reading more.
Chad, do you know the 3 most read books in America?
I gotta be honest and say I do because you have the answer in front of me. Yet if you didn't, I bet I would have guessed 2 out of the 3.
You might have to help me pronounce one, so get ready.
Mao Tse-tung.
The first, I think everyone would probably guess this, is the Bible.
Yes, absolutely,
right?
100% I would have guessed that.
And quotations from Chairman
Mao Tse-tung.
Mao Tse-tung.
Yes, and everybody had to read that because they probably had to read that.
Right, sure. The last one,
I would have guessed.
not
I
super
absolutely
surprising,
would have guessed. No, I would have guessed this for sure.
is Harry Potter.
Yeah, I would have
Most read
absolutely
books.
guessed it. I can remember when book 7 came out, the race to read it before a friend ruined it for you. So yeah, I absolutely would have gotten it. All right.
And I have not read Harry Potter.
Oh,
I've probably
God.
watched 1 or 2 of the movies, maybe. It just does not interest me.
Oh my God.
But this is not what the podcast is about, Chad, because we have the benefits of reading next.
Next, the benefits
so Chad,
of reading.
Tell us the first few.
Okay, reading lowers stress. Studies will actually show that 30 minutes of reading per day will have a similar stress-reducing effect to doing 30 minutes of yoga. And I got to tell you this, it hurts a lot less to read than it does to do yoga sometimes.
That's what I was thinking. That's the first thing that came to mind.
If I had a choice, I'm picking up a book for 30 minutes instead of actually doing yoga for 30
Except we
minutes.
won't get our exercise point on the 15-point plan, so we
I
might just
will.
have to
it
do
just
both.
won't be from yoga. All right. Reading is an excuse to put your phone away at night. Okay, so being on our phone is one of the things that prevents us from falling asleep. Think about you're supposed to turn off the blue light that's coming from it. Yet reading a printed book will actually relax you, making it an ideal bedtime activity. I can remember hundreds of nights falling asleep with the book in my hand, right? Waking up and still having the book on my face or something like that. Third one, Jillene, give us the third one here.
Reading helps families bond. And I love this one when I found this in the research. So when parents read out loud to their kids, they can pass on these benefits of reading if using what they say is like printed picture type books.
Yep.
Versus like a Kindle or technology for reading. And doing this will create deep connections that are proven between the parent and the child.
So, Jillene, give us the favorite go-to book around your house when the kids want a book time.
Ketchup Can't Hurt by Chad Himes.
Oh, really? That'd be sweet if it was true.
Blakely loves it. She does. She actually put it in her special pile of books to read before bed.
Oh.
It's a very good book, actually. I love that one. It's got pictures and the words. I actually have it as one of my 15 points, right? Because learning and reading is a point on the 15-point plan.
Yep.
And I do it for myself every day, but I also have it as part of my package for doing it for the kids. And I have it on my habit tracker.
Good.
Because I see how that will impact their future life. And these benefits that we're talking about as adults will actually come about by reading to them as kids.
Okay. We all know you all have a favorite children's book out there. We're going to ask you in the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/winmakegive. Come join us when this episode drops. We will be asking you in the group for your favorite book to read around the house with the kids or that you remember having read to you when you were a kid. All right, Jillene, tell us a little bit. Let's go on now. You've given us some of the great benefits. Next.
We want to talk about the difference between reading and hearing. So some of you love Audible and some of you like the paper copy, right?
Yep.
The printed copy. So Chad, let me ask this of you.
Paper.
Okay. What about me?
I don't know. What about you?
You're supposed to ask.
Oh, I'm supposed to ask you? All right. What about you?
Both.
Okay.
Not simultaneously.
Which is Ben's answer. If we asked Ben, he would say listening to the Audible while watching the words go by in the book.
I'm just not sure I'm that disciplined to like make that line up, but I do read in the morning.
Okay.
And then I listen to Audible in my car.
Do you listen to the same thing to rehear it, or are you listening to something different?
Different. So I'm reading 2 different books at one time. I'm reading one and listening to one.
Okay.
But that being said, I actually thought that studies would point out the benefits and like way one is more valuable than the other, but
Okay.
it didn't. The research showed that there are benefits and maybe some drawbacks to both. So the reality is, Chad, we can zone out reading paperback or listening to audio, and it can take seconds or even minutes to snap out of it. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It happens all the time when I'm listening to a book.
Right. So let's dig in a little bit more. A professor at Bloomberg University conducted a study with 3 groups: one that used printed copy and e-readers, one who did Audible and audio versions,
Okay.
and then another group a third group who did both the printed copy and the Audible
So you got the
simultaneously.
Chad version, the Jillene version, and the Ben Kinney version here.
Right. Yeah. Good,
Right.
good example.
Okay.
And here's what she said, and we're
Ben's
keeping this
smarter
short.
than all of us. Right.
She said, "We found no significant differences in comprehension between reading, listening, or reading and listening simultaneously."
All right. So there's no benefit one way over the other. It's purely preference.
Well, here's some more benefits of audio, if we want to talk about that, is interestingly enough, this actually came up in the research. There's a privacy factor to Audible.
Okay.
Meaning, if you're on a journey and it's kind of a solo journey, maybe you're reading or listening to self-love or literary, or maybe you haven't read 50 Shades of Grey, Chad, and you don't want to buy the paper version that's going to sit in your car on your table.
Okay.
You get that on Audible.
You
and
just watch
there's
the
a
movie.
privacy factor. I
Just
agree.
watch the movie.
Audio can speed up the learning and listening process, especially if one can focus on the words that are being said versus multitasking and tuning out.
That I will agree with. And I'm sure there's somebody listening to our podcast right now on 1.5 times speed or 2 times speed. You can do that. Yes.
Yes, I do that to you, Chad, all the
Okay.
time. In reading printed copy, this is really interesting to me. 10 to 15% of our eye movements during reading are actually regressive, meaning the eyes are going back and rechecking what we just read.
Yep.
This happens very quickly and seamlessly, and this reading quirk can bolster that comprehension.
It's interesting. If you had asked me that, I would have said, no, my eyes don't do that. Yet Dave and I have been working on recording the audio version of Achieve Your Apex. And I get words wrong because my eyes are darting back to make
Right.
sure I just said the right thing when I was reading and stuff like that. It's very
Right.
interesting. I wouldn't have realized that until this time.
Right. So to summarize, Chad,
Yeah.
audio versus printed copy, or both, or whatever fits best into your preferred learning style,
Yeah.
is the way to go. And just do it every single day. It's consistency over perfection.
Okay.
So it's that consistency factor, progress over perfection. Chad, how often do you read?
Minimum 15 minutes every day is dedicated to reading. I usually end up getting more than that. Yet that's minimum. I want to make sure I read at least 15 because that'll get me a chapter of what I'm probably reading.
That's great.
You? I wasn't supposed to ask you this one.
Right now, I know, right? I think I'm listening to about 30 minutes on Audible and about 15 to 20 minutes on paper copy.
Okay, got
So
it. Now, you
that's-
mentioned at the beginning of this episode, you had a story about someone anonymous that was impactful or something. I'm excited to hear this story.
Yeah, I didn't really want to. I wanted to bring stories of like Richard Branson because he's like a mentor of mine, or
Sure.
Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, and I thought, no, let's do an ordinary Joe.
Okay.
So this is an ordinary Joe story. This ordinary Joe originally thought that reading was the epitome of boredom.
Sure.
I think sometimes when you're younger or you've gone through college and you were forced to read, sometimes it takes the fun out of reading, and people can take, a hiatus from reading for a while until they find that spark back. And that's what happened to this guy. And the spark happened, and he said, okay, I'm going to change that. Let's see what happens with my life. So he read 16 books in 1 year, which isn't a ton, but for someone who isn't reading maybe even or completing 1 book in a year, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So he read 16 books in 1 year, and this is what he said. Prior to developing this habit, I felt like I was going through the motions of life with a limited perspective of the world. I had never actively questioned or challenged the way our society works, and I was merely striving to be the best at what was expected of me. But the habit of reading had a miraculous and mystifying effect on me. It felt like I opened myself to a whole new world, as though I was reborn with an elevated state of consciousness. I was no longer enslaved by the hardline mindset I once possessed. And I'll end with sort of a fun stat, Chad, which
I'm going to
is
throw some fun stats after you, so you're not ending yet, but
okay,
let's see what you got.
perfect. Adults who read for only 30 minutes a week are 20% or more likely to have greater life satisfaction.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
And you can see that play out in this average Joe's story.
Yep.
And so I hope that inspired people. If you ever feel like you are in that state of being where you might have that hardline mindset, sometimes reading is the ticket out. We always need to keep our minds open, and that's where our world, I believe, will find the progress that we need.
All right, Jillene, let me share 2 stats with our audience. I don't think they're going to be impacted by these, yet I want them to realize how powerful this is. 33%, that's 1 out of every 3 high school graduates in the United States never reads another book after school. 1 out of every 3 kids that graduates high school doesn't pick up another book the rest of their life to read. And 80% of families this year have not purchased a book. Now, this year means last year, right? Because we're so early in the year. But over last year, 80% of families have not actually purchased a new book.
Wow.
Right? Folks, the reading in the world is there for you. All right, Jillene, wrap this one up for us. What do you got as the final thought in the world of reading as an influence?
Well, I want to ask you, Chad, what are your top 2 recommendations for books to read this year?
For books to read this year.
The ones that you believe will influence and impact our lives the most.
Well, if I'm going to believe it's going to influence and impact your life the most, I have to have the shameless plug, right?
Do
because
it.
I wouldn't have written it if I didn't think it would impact you, and I would have to say Achieve Your Apex.
Yes, can be found on Amazon.
Amazon, or go to achieveyourapex.com and I'll send you a signed copy, same price.
I didn't get a signed copy.
You didn't go to achieveyourapex.com to buy your copy.
But I see you every week. We're going to have to
maybe
change
I'll
this.
be nice and sign it for you. The other one, Jillene, if you put me on the spot and said, pick one book, I would tell people, go read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Really good.
I think there are so many lessons in that book that you need to read and reread.
And reread, yeah. Ben Kinney actually gave that to me, I think, as my first book, the first book he ever gave me.
It's a great one, and I probably read it once a year. I go through it and make sure I know those 7 habits. Jillene, what about you? Give me a recommendation. I can guess what one of your recommendations is going to be because you don't stop talking about this book. Yet give us your recommendations.
Well, I already said Ketchup Can't Hurt.
Well, of course. I appreciate that.
Well, Atomic Habits.
Yeah, that absolutely.
Gosh, I have like 5 or 10 copies in my office just sitting there because I love to give them out. I think it's one you can read on an annual basis. The second would be The 4 Agreements.
It's a great choice.
It's an amazing foundational book for life. And I also think it's one that you can reread. It's great for like a 2-hour flight. You can read it all and it's a short read and it's so impactful. And again, you know, our influences, Chad, are limited, right? They're limited for what we choose. It could be TV or podcasts and books and people, and we're choosing a lot of those things, but it's also limited.
Yes.
Sometimes I can't go sit down with Richard Branson and have lunch with him.
Correct.
At least at the moment. But I can pick up his book and read it. And so I think the goal here is if you want to elevate the influence in your life for the better and create this open-mindedness that you can see can really change both the way that your brain functions and the way that you perceive and your outlook on life, read a book and set a plan in motion to read X number of books this year, whether you're listening to it on audio or you're reading that paperback version. I find myself on Amazon more, hitting that buy now button on a book and then making a plan to read it.
Yes.
Right? I think that's the ticket because then you pick up a book, you read the first chapter, you don't finish it if there's not that plan in place. So go out there and make a plan and share your favorite books with us as well on the Facebook page. We'd love to hear.
Facebook.com/group/WinMakeGive. We want to know your favorite children's book. That's where we started. We want to go there. We also will then ask you a few days later for your just overall book of the year, if you could recommend one book for everybody to read this year. I have one more request for everybody in our audience. If you have the connection to Richard Branson, let's make Jillene's dream come true and let's make that lunch happen. Who can connect me to someone so we can surprise Jillene and get her that lunch and sit down opportunity with Mr. Branson? Maybe a spaceship ride, who knows what it'll be.
I'd take that too.
Of course you would. All right, folks, we hope this episode ups your energy and takes you to the next level.